I'm Doug Boynton. You are listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition, where we highlight the week's news and stories happening in our area. In this week's program, a new state plan will bring change across the Commonwealth. Virginians should expect to see a boom in housing and business development in the coming years. Suffolk just elected its first black woman to their city council. WHRO's Nick McNamara sat down with Ebony Wright to discuss her plans for office.
I was running because I wanted to make some meaningful change in my community.
And rising water levels are a problem for coastal cities, so what exactly will happen around the country? Well, it depends on where you look. It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. Greater Virginia Peninsula homelessness is projected to steadily increase by 5% every year for the next 4 years. That's according to a preliminary report from Newport News. WHRO's Nick McNamara reports.
VM Advising's Jonathan Danforth, one of the report's authors, says the study is intended to identify the conditions leading people to lose housing and project future needs for peninsula localities.
We want to make sure that folks are informed and aware of the reality and what are the best practices that they could choose from to address the homeless crisis.
Nearly 24 people turned up this week in Williamsburg to hear about the issue. Researchers pointed to affordability as one clear cause for people to lose housing, noting average rent increased by more than 35% on the peninsula since 2020. The impact is greater for families, as well as Black, Indigenous, and disabled people. VM suggests increasing the stock of affordable and multifamily housing and amending housing and zoning policies to improve outcomes for people experiencing homelessness. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Virginia construction workers will have their hands full over the next few years. The state will help fund housing construction alongside significant business development under a new program. WHRO's Ryan Murphy has the latest on the state's affordable housing efforts.
Governor Glenn Youngkin says the state's successfully attracting new businesses, but that's only part of the equation.
And imagine announcing 500 new jobs in a community that doesn't have the housing to provide 500 new great job seekers.
Youngkin says the state desperately needs to ramp up housing supply to battle rising costs. The new Workforce Housing Initiative will spend $75 million over the next 5 years to help localities develop as many as 5,000 housing units specifically for workers near major employers. Youngkin unveiled the program at the Governor's Housing Conference in Virginia Beach, a city where studies show many employees can't afford to live where they work. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
Suicides continued to rise in the military in 2023, including in the Navy and Air Force. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh says it's part of a decade-long trend.
The overall suicide rate among active duty troops rose 9% in 2023, according to figures released this week. The sharpest increase was in the Army, but the Navy and Air Force also saw slight increases. The Pentagon says the number is not statistically significant, but it continues an overall trend that shows suicide steadily rising since 2011. The vast majority of the suicides happen inside the U.S. in the 5 states with the highest concentration of military forces, including Virginia. They are younger and are more likely to use a personal firearm. The increases come even after the Navy instituted a number of policies in the wake of a rash of deaths at facilities in Hampton Roads and on board the USS George Washington in 2021 and 2022. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
Troops and veterans experiencing a mental health emergency can call 988, then select option 1 to speak with a VA staffer. Williamsburg elected its first black woman to city council. In a twist, she is also the first active undergraduate student elected to a seat. WHRO's Nick McNamara reports.
Ayanna Williams wants to be an ear for all residents of Williamsburg when she's sworn into office in January 2025.
The best superpower one person can have is the ability to listen. That's my plan. That's what I hope to do.
The 20-year-old councilwoman-elect is a William and Mary government major. She was the only newcomer elected to city council this year. Williams says she wants to invest in education, grow the stock of affordable and accessible housing, and safeguard the local environment. She'll take outgoing Councilman Caleb Rogers' seat, who did not seek re-election after serving for 4 years. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
In Suffolk's city election, Ebony Wright defeated incumbent Roger Fawcett for the Sleepy Hole borough seat, becoming the first black woman elected to that council. WHRO's Nick McNamara caught up with Wright to talk about her victory and her plans for office.
You're the first black woman elected to council in Suffolk. Up north, Ayanna Williams became the first black woman elected to council in Williamsburg. What does this say to you about Hampton Roads?
What it says to me is that women are progressively gaining positions that impact their communities. So I'm not a native of Suffolk. I'm a native of California. The military brought me here, and I've been here over 20 years. When I charted off and started my run for city council, I didn't even think about that. Like, I was running because I wanted to make some meaningful change in my community. But as I ran, people made that comment. I'll tell you, it was a little shocking to me that there hadn't been an African-American woman on city council. There are quite a few. I believe we have 3 African-American men on city council, and the city has seen a black mayor, Johnny Mazzell, but I didn't know because I'm not a native from here. All I wanted to do was impact change. That didn't change my race, but I'll tell you, it is an honor to be the first. But I didn't set out to be the first. I will say that.
What do you think this year's election results spell to city officials about the direction that residents want to see Suffolk start to move in?
The main thing is building an effective communication plan with constituents that focuses on transparency, community engagement, and community consensus. A lot of the development that has happened, the rapid growth that has happened in our city, has caused our quality of life to change significantly. Now, some things could have been avoided. Some things could have been more strategically planned, especially where infrastructure is in place on rezoning and items that have been zoned before, like previously zoned maybe 10 years ago or before the current administration. But what could have been done differently was the infrastructure and ensuring that we take a look at how things have been rezoned before we approve zoning applications going forward. The biggest thing for this election is the ability for the city to communicate what can be done, what has been done, and to take some ownership when there have been some issues or some decisions that were poorly made.
On the topic of growth and development, I'm curious what you think Suffolk can do to safeguard its villages.
Well, to safeguard its villages, again, I think we have to be careful in how we plan and develop. We have to ensure we fix some of the infrastructure with our villages. They have made some recent improvement to the village plans, which I think is going to move us in the right direction. But I feel that there is still much to be desired.
And I also wanted to move over a little bit into talking about schools as well. And I'm curious, what do you think needs to be prioritized for Suffolk Public Schools in the next year?
I think the immediate things that need to be taken care of are the things that we can. There's a mold issue at John Yates Middle School. That doesn't require you rebuilding a school, but it does require some type of mediation, mold remediation for that school, and to make sure we have safety measures in place to ensure that our kids are safe. That we had an issue this past year, but I believe Suffolk Public Schools is working to improve the safety. I think they're doing a good job at working to improve the safety of our schools. But the key things are health and safety for me, because when it comes to building and things that are in the capital improvement plan, many of those things are much further down the line and require money that we may or may not have. But the things we can fix are the safety and health type issues that I think we should take a close look at.
Is there anything else you think Suffolk voters or residents should know about you to understand your perspective that you'll take with you into office?
My perspective is we are voted in by the people and we work for the people. And it is my desire, my hope, and I will do as best as I can to govern with honor, courage, commitment, and integrity, and ensure that I carry their voice to the table. I may not get it right every time, and I may not be perfect, but what I will be is honest and walk with integrity and be honorable.
That was Suffolk City Council member-elect Ebony Wright with WHRO's Nick McNamara. Suffolk's mayoral election was determined by just 161 votes. Citizen groups tell WHRO's Nick McNamara that concerns about the rate of growth in the city drove the result.
Thomas Ryan, president of Citizens Voice, says the tight mayor race signals a call to take a second look at the city's direction.
I think that sometimes we lose sight of the little things. People wanting to get home to see their kids' baseball game or football game on time. People wanting to get to work on time or get their kids to school. And that has just been a big challenge over the last 2 years.
Mayor Mike Duman says he's always had an open ear to residents and that he will continue to make decisions based on all the facts and data available. The margin of victory leaves open the possibility of a recount. Runner-up and former state delegate Clinton Jenkins did not respond when WHRO reached out with questions. Duman won his first mayor race in 2020 by nearly 6,000 votes. 2012 was the last mayoral election in Suffolk decided by less than a percentage point, and 2008 was the last time a Suffolk mayor won with under 40% of votes. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Still ahead on Weekly Edition, Something in the Water is back for 2025, but with some stipulations that weren't previously around. But first, Hampton is all in on boosting climate resilience. The city approved an update to its comprehensive plan. WHRO's Catherine Hafner reported the story.
The new plan is focused on natural infrastructure. That means taking advantage of trees, oyster reefs, and wetlands, instead of man-made things like bridges, roads, and pipes. City Resilience Officer Olivia Askew told council members the goal is to adapt to living with water as sea levels rise.
This is looking at considering water from two different aspects, both the challenges that come with water and our flooding that we experience, and also to treat water resources as an asset.
The plan highlights spots around the city to plant or protect trees that capture stormwater and provide shade for residents. Officials also want to use marshes to bolster shorelines from erosion, turn abandoned lots into native plant meadows, and prevent future development in open spaces. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Virginia Beach and Something in the Water organizers signed an agreement for the 2025 festival. It includes deadlines for ticket sales and lineups, requirements that were absent from previous festival agreements. WHRO's Sienna Morales has more.
While the agreement resembles previous sponsorship contracts, there are some new features this time around. Festival organizers agreed to open ticket sales and release a lineup by December 31st. They also agreed to produce a festival in 2026 and 2027 in Virginia Beach. The city agreed to pay $500,000 to the festival in increments. Organizers will receive a portion after completing the contract and will get the rest when they open ticket sales and apply for a special events permit. Like previous festivals, the city will pay tax revenues generated by the event and provide in-kind services. Sienna Morales, WHRO News.
There are plenty of predictions that one day oceans will swallow islands, flood major cities, and wipe out vast stretches of coastline. It's hard to picture. What will it mean for the sea to rise 2 feet, 4 feet, even 7 feet by the end of the century? Turns out it depends where you look. WHRO's Catherine Hafner worked with the team at WWNO's Sea Change podcast in New Orleans to show what rising water looks like across the country. Here's an excerpt of Catherine's report from Virginia's Middle Peninsula in the latest episode of Sea Change.
We start in Virginia's Middle Peninsula. It's a rural area spread out along the Chesapeake Bay. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, known as NOAA, predicts sea levels could rise more than 2 feet here in 50 years. And people there are dealing with a growing issue caused by sea level rise. Their number one problem is number two. I'm talking about poop. Backyard septic systems are flooding, forcing sewage into people's homes and swamping their yards. It's such a big problem locally that people who know about this kind of thing call southeastern Virginia the septic repair capital of the East Coast. Quite a thing to be known for. Catherine Hafner, a reporter with WHRO, shows us how they're trying to fix this poopy problem.
Jamie Miller is who you call when sewage backs up into your home and overflows your toilet or your lawn. He's a septic guy. I spent a day riding along with Jamie to see him in action, and how he thinks about his job kind of surprised me.
Like, Dr. Phil is not the best doctor, but he's known as the expert because he went out and helped so many people. I have an interest in doing that.
Jamie serves customers all across what's called the Middle Peninsula. It's a roughly 60-mile-long piece of land that juts into the Chesapeake Bay about halfway up Virginia's coast. The Middle Peninsula is beautiful, lush and green and surrounded by water. As the ocean rises, it's pushing up groundwater too, so the soil here is wet and getting wetter. Southeastern Virginia is seeing one of the highest rates of sea level rise on the East Coast, in part because the land is sinking. That makes places like the Middle Peninsula particularly vulnerable. And that all means Jamie is very busy. All day long, his phone kept ringing.
Here it goes. Hello?
And ringing.
Yeah, hold on. Hello?
And ringing.
Hold on 1 second. Hello?
Here's what Jamie is seeing more and more of. A homeowner calls. Jamie drives to their house and digs into the ground to get at an old septic tank. But it's like he's digging in sand at the beach. Water oozes into the hole from the sides. Jamie says he doesn't know much about climate change, but this experience over and over is all the proof he needs to know that groundwater is rising.
How did these systems get installed years ago? Because right now, if you dig, if you dig a hole, it's a pool of water. How do you install this in that? Which tells me that the water level had to be lower.
At least 1 in 5 Americans, typically in rural areas, rely on their own backyard septic systems instead of public sewers. Here's how they work. All the pipes in your house flow into a septic tank underground in your yard, a holding tank. The tank slowly releases liquid into an underground drain field. It's the soil that really does the dirty work. Bacteria in the soil naturally filter pollutants and break down the sewage. But when your yard is too wet, when the whole system is underwater, your poop becomes everyone's problem. Sewage flows into waterways like the Chesapeake Bay, which the government has long been working to restore. It can lead to toxic algae blooms, kill fish, and force beaches to close. And this isn't just a Virginia problem. Scientists say we don't have a handle on the scale yet, let alone how to fix it. But we do know that more than 1/3 of homes across the Southeast rely on septic systems, and many are already failing. The bottom line is, if you're one of Jamie Miller's unlucky customers, then you're likely about to get a massive bill.
Hear more from WHRO's Catherine Hafner in the full episode of WWNO's Sea Change podcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
In what seems to be turning into a trend, yet another house has collapsed in the Outer Banks, this time amid high winds and high seas. Public Radio East's Annette Weston has more.
Officials with Cape Hatteras National Seashore say the beach in front of Rodanthe is temporarily closed because of dangerous debris after an unoccupied home collapsed on Surfside Drive. Cleanup operations are limited, they say, because of the severe weather conditions, as well as the closure of NC Highway 12 between the Bass Knight Bridge and Rodanthe. The Seashore is also monitoring other threatened homes at G.A. Kohler Court and Seotes Drive. 6 houses have collapsed in Rodanthe since May 2024. In the Outer Banks, I'm Annette Weston, Public Radio East.
Residents said they'd be willing to fork over the cash to keep their recycling services, so Norfolk and Virginia Beach agreed to renew their contracts with TFC Recycling. WHRO's Catherine Hafner visited the facility in Chesapeake.
If you toss recycling into a blue bin in Hampton Roads, chances are those items will come here to TFC's sorting plant. It processes more than 200 tons a day.
So material gets dumped from the trucks. It goes by about 6 to 8 people that are removing non-acceptable items. It then proceeds to some mechanical screening equipment.
That's President Mike Benedetto. He says the material then runs through an optical sorting unit using artificial intelligence to do final separation.
It'll fire a jet as it gets to the end of the conveyor, and all those noises you hear are removing the paper from the bottles and cans.
There are only a few things you should recycle in Hampton Roads: paper, bottles, and cans. They're compacted into bales and shipped to customers in Virginia and beyond. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
After losing 2 presidents in a month, Project 1619 Incorporated has new leadership and plans to share the story of the first Africans taken to Old Point Comfort. WHRO's Nick McNamara reported the story.
Melinda Steele was elected president by the Project 1619 board last week. An understudy of founder Calvin Pearson, Steele says the board plans to grow the focus of the group beyond Hampton Roads.
We want to expand the notoriety of the organization globally. And so we do have initiatives that we are working on as a board discussing how to go forth with that.
Project 1619 was founded in 2008 to tell the full story of the first African people taken to Fort Monroe in 1619. Steele says the board needs more time to formalize their new plans before making them public. Additionally, the board chose Vanita Benitez to serve as vice president. They selected Larry Kamal Gibson to serve as the organization's ambassador. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Virginia Tech will deploy new technology for 3D printing homes in an effort to create more affordable housing. WHRO's Ryan Murphy has the latest.
The 11-foot arm on the tread-mounted 3D printer bobs and weaves a few inches at a time, tracing the shape of a concrete bench. A few short keystrokes could tell it to print the walls of a new home instead. Andrew McCoy from Virginia Tech says the sleek mobile device, no bigger than a Bobcat excavator, is a far cry from the one they used to print 2 homes in 2021.
The previous machine took 3 semis of flatbeds and was very expensive just to move, and then we had a crane to put it together as a gantry printer.
A $1.1 million grant from Virginia Housing will help get the machine into commercial hands to build 10 3D printed homes and let researchers see it in action.
So the goal is to take a lot of the risk, financially and otherwise, away from builders, so they want to try the technology. They want to try it out and see what it's like.
The hope is that developers adopt the tech to speed up the production of housing and ultimately ease the state's housing shortage. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from WHRO's Catherine Hafner, Steve Walsh, Ryan Murphy, Sienna Morales, and Nick McNamara. Annette Weston with Public Radio East contributed. Also, thanks as always to Connor Worley, who produced today's show. A reminder, you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed. You can get your news updates at WHRO.org. the WHRO smartphone app, and the WHRO Reports podcast feed. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Stay safe. Be well.